Hello. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. We're so happy to see so many faces after such a long hiatus with very few faces for preview. First of all, thank you to Luis Bettner for the wonderful piano playing. We've really enjoyed that. And as usual, please silence your cell phones. I want everybody bending down to silence their cell phones. If you're new to the burger, and some people actually are, the bathrooms are in the back corner to my right. Registration. There were forms at the desk, but we really prefer that you register online if at all possible. The website is on the pens that you were just given, and it's on the banner over there. It's oakmontll.org. And the reason for that is twofold. Number one, most of the classes in this particular case, except for the movie class, they're recorded, they're Zoomed and recorded. If you, for some reason, are missing a class, if you're signed up online, it's very easy for you to get the Zoom or the recording link. If you signed up in person, then you have to email us and we have to add you, and it's much more complicated for you. And also, if you sign up online, you can use a credit card, where you can't do if you sign up here or at the OVA office. But you're welcome to sign up here. You're welcome to sign up at the OVA office, or you're welcome to sign up at the first class. On the back, you all got the pen, I hope. Did everybody get a pen? There's also bags that we had at other times. They're on the back table. You're welcome to take those. They're nice for shopping. And the other thing is, I don't know how many of you know, we do have scholarships. So if the money is a little bit tight, if the price is a little bit steep, don't feel any kind of discomfort in asking at the registration desk for a scholarship. Okay, and especially for people who really like to take 2 classes but can only afford 1, or anything like that. So feel free to ask for a scholarship. I hope all of you partook of some of the cookies. We really don't want to take them home. So, if you didn't get any cookies when you came in, but they'll be there before you leave. And feel free to take some. One more thing, on your seats, you have seen the flyers for our concerts. In addition to the classes, we also have concerts. The next one coming up is on September 9th. It's the Garuda Blue Band. I Googled them. They're really quite awesome, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun. So we encourage you to sign up for Garuda Blue and our other concert, but especially Garuda Blue. There haven't been too many signups because the publicity has been kind of low, and we really don't want to cancel because I think it'll be a fun kind of evening, and it's table seating so people can bring some munchies or dinner and have a good time. It is now my pleasure to introduce Doug Garrison, who is the head of our curriculum committee, which puts this classes together.
Thank you, everyone. I want to again welcome you. Thank you so much for taking time this afternoon to join us, and it's great to see so many with us. We've got a really good lineup. I do want to reiterate on the 4 ways to register for the class. You can do it online, oakmontll.org. And as Evelyn explained, that gives us then your contact information in case you miss a class and want to access the Zoom recording. It also allows you to pay by credit card. All of the other means require that you write a check. And so that would either be signing up with us here at the preview today, or filling out a form at the Oakmont Village Association office, or paying at the first day of the class. I want to urge you, if you at all can, to register early. The reason being that it helps us logistically immensely to know how many people will be registered in each of the classes. And if there's a long wait and we don't find out to the first day, it just makes it more challenging for us. So if you can, after today's examination, make a decision, that would be wonderful and we'd really appreciate it. And as Evelyn said, you don't ever have to miss a class again, with the one exception of the film course, which we're not able to Zoom record because of the need to show the entire film. All of the others are recorded. And so if you find yourself out of town or having to miss a class for some reason, you just need to let us know, and we'll be very happy to give you the access so that you can still participate and not feel like you missed anything. Okay. Let's see. I also wanted to mention to you that your feedback is really welcomed and it's terribly important. We want to know from you what kinds of classes you want, what you think of the ones we're offering. And there's a survey that's at the entry table that we invite you, if you haven't already filled one out, to complete for us and to leave with us. And we look at that information very, very carefully in making our decisions. And then finally, after the instructor presentations today, each of those individuals will be available to answer questions or clarify the content of their courses. We encourage you to stick around and just have an opportunity to chat with these wonderful people and get to really get a feeling for who they are and let them understand who you are and what your interests are as well. It can really round out your afternoon. So our first class is music and the movies. Music and motion pictures are a match made in heaven. The right soundtrack can make a giant gorilla sympathetic or turn a starlit drive into a scary nightmare. We'll explore the changing technology of sound and the developments in film scoring through the decades. This course is a 3-week course that meets on Mondays beginning September the 12th from 3 to 5 here in the Burger Center. The fee is $50. The instructor is Deborah Rosengaus. She holds a master's degree in music from the Manhattan School of Music and a bachelor's degree in music from the University of Southern California. She's been a guest lecturer at Shandong University in China, for Santa Clara University Osher Lifelong Learning Institute, and she teaches courses at San Mateo Adult School, San Francisco Opera Guild, and many local community and senior centers. A versatile mezzo-soprano, she has toured internationally, performing in concert halls and opera houses in Tokyo, Beijing, Los Angeles, New York, Mexico, and is a featured vocalist on several independent film tracks. And in fact, because of a rehearsal conflict, she can't be with us here in person, but is with us via broadcast. And so please welcome Deborah Rosengaus.
Hi, everybody. Raise your hands if you can hear me okay. Fantastic. Okay, fantastic. Yes, as Doug mentioned, I am in the show Gypsy at the moment, and I have to be in the theater. And unfortunately, because traffic patterns are so unforgiving, I'm not there in person. But if you do have any questions, please feel free to contact me. You can check me out on my website, deborahrosengaus.com, and I'm happy to answer any questions. There's a little contact form there you may have about the class. Or maybe you want to come see Gypsy. But we'll be doing, increase my volume. This is as much volume as I have. I can talk louder. If I talk louder, can you hear me better? Okay, I'm just going to talk as loud as I can. This class is a super fun class. It's going to cover a lot of things that you're probably familiar with. I mean, the most famous movie music score, one of the most famous, and it's only 2 notes. Da-dum. Brownie points if you guess what movie that's from. We're going to cover a lot of history here, and we'll cover perhaps most importantly, the technology that changes through the decades. Just for fun, I have here an example of what was being done in theaters. I think you're all a little too young to have witnessed this yourself, but this is a little taste of a live pianist, and he is improvising music to a silent film. So before there was sound and film together, the theaters would hire orchestras if they were really wealthy. But let's be honest, most cities, most towns couldn't afford a full orchestra employed full time for the movie theater. So we had pianists, or actually any instrument would just sit back there. In Mexico, it was guitars were very popular. But here's a little bit of a Buster Keaton film that you can see here being accompanied by piano in lieu of a soundtrack. And this is live, so you'll see the pianist down in one corner and the film in the other. Let's just watch a minute of this so you can get an idea. So that gives you just a little taste of what some of those going to one of those early films would have been like. Then, of course, there's the big drama with the changeover. The entire industry changed over from silent film to talkies to sound and film in under 2 years, if you can believe that. Think of any industry on the planet that has moved that quickly into a total different department. Imagine gas cars to electric in 2 years. So this is a little taste from a film. It is one of my favorite movies of all time, Singing in the Rain. It has a very magical scene that shows some of the bumps in the road that film studios had to deal with. Will be another topic. We'll talk about the studios. But this is a little scene here from Singing in the Rain that deals with the problems faced by the industry. So, little taste here.
Could remember where the microphone was, boss.
'Tis Cupid himself that calls me. And I, bitten by his arrow, must come charging press down.
The night is full of our eating. Hey, Lena, what you hitting him with, a blackjack?
I love you. 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 I love you.
Did somebody get paid for writing that dialogue?
Sounds like a comedy inside.
It's a Lockwood Lamont talkie.
What?
This is terrible.
No, come on.
What's that?
The sound. It's out of synchronization.
Well, tell them to fix it.
Yes, sir.
What's this? Yvonne? Captured by Rouge Noir, the purple terror? Oh, my sword! I must fly to her side. Yvonne, my own.
Pierre will save me. Pierre.
Pierre is miles away, you witch.
No.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
This is a...
That thing still makes me laugh, even after all these years of watching it. And those aches and pains were very, very real for a lot of studios. So it'll be my pleasure to show you how the studios dealt with that and all the crazy technologies they came up with to try to surmount these issues. And then, of course, I would be remiss if we didn't talk about some of the incredible composers in this genre and the incredible scores that they wrote. I won't show you the video. If you just listen, see if you can name that tune. So here's one that's real famous. Can you hear that? Raise your hands if you could hear that okay. Okay. Well, I'll share the screen for the next one. See if you recognize this famous little soundbite. One of the most famous, most iconic sounds and invented for film. It's a little stressful to listen to, isn't it? There's a whole story that comes behind the creation of that sound, which we'll definitely talk about. One of the most difficult guys to work with in the business, Hitchcock. And just to illustrate how important soundtracks can be for music, I have a little experiment here. We're going to watch just a minute of a very famous film called No Country for Old Men, which the creative team decided they were not going to put a soundtrack on it. So what I've done is I have put two different soundtracks to the same clip. And just see how you feel about the clip having this auditory input that is so different. So I'll start the clip up, and then I'll share my screen with you, not to ruin the surprise. Okay, here we go. First version. Okay, for time, I'm going to stop it there. And what I'm going to do is play you the exact same clip, except featuring a very, very different soundtrack, and see how you feel about what you're seeing, listening to this completely opposite soundtrack. Here we go. That's a different experience, isn't it? It is the power of music in film. I think if you watch a horror movie with the sound turned off, you won't be nearly as scared. And likewise, if you watch a romantic comedy with the sound turned off, I think you'll find the script writing somewhat doesn't suffice. We don't feel as much. A lot of that romantic music in the background really does the trick. So I believe that is close to my time, but I do want to encourage you to reach out if you have any questions. And hope to see you in class starting September 12th from 3 to 5. And we'll dig into a lot of these famous composers and famous films and the technology and all the crazy characters who got involved in the LA film scene. So until then, thank you so much.
Thank you, Deborah. Music in the movies. Sounds like a very, very interesting opportunity. And now, as Monty Python fans would know, for something completely different, Tales from the Foreign Service. In this course, we'll learn about the Foreign Service through firsthand stories and anecdotes about the challenges, work specialties, security and health risks, and the impact on family members, whether it's a plane crash, a coup d'etat, or a pandemic. See how diplomats rise to the occasion, and this is in an up-close and personal format. This is a 6-week course that's on Wednesdays. It begins September the 21st. The fee is $95. There are resources if you wish to read more as a background for this course, although it's not required, available on our website, oakmontll.org, and we'll have written copies as well. The instructor, Marie Hutala, is a Petaluma resident. She's a career diplomat, teacher, and student of public affairs who spent 33 years working in Asia, Canada, Europe, and Washington, D.C. Please welcome the former United States Ambassador to Malaysia, Marie Hutala.
Can you hear me? Oh, there we go. Good. All right. Get my presentation up here. Start this slide. Then if I just do this, it'll work, right? Okay. All right. Well, thank you for bearing with us. Very happy to be here. Let me start by asking you a question. When I say the word foreign service, what images come into your mind right away? Maybe a 19th century dude in a top hat? Maybe a bunch of gray people in gray suits in a conference room hatching out a trade agreement or something? Or maybe you've seen these movies where the young Americans are in trouble in a foreign country and they come into the embassy and there's a heartless bureaucrat behind a big wooden desk and he refuses to help them, right? You've seen that. Well, all of these images, of course, are outdated and wrong. And I'm here to give you a much more accurate picture. In fact, we all got a much clearer idea during the impeachment hearings the first time around for Trump, when we saw some very impressive Foreign Service officers testifying, Marie Yovanovitch, Bill Taylor, and George Kent. I know we were all very impressed by their courage and their professionalism. But I'm here to tell you, they are not extraordinary in the Foreign Service. They embody the professionalism that everyone shares. Foreign Service officers, men and women, are working around the world in formal and informal situations, using their contacts and the relationships they build to advance American interests, promote cooperation with other countries, and explain American policies and values. In many ways, the Foreign Service is truly the first line of defense for the United States, because if the diplomats do their job, we don't ever need the military to come in and start dying, right? But look at the differences. We know a lot about the military. We don't know as much about the Foreign Service. And look at the size. There's over 1,400,000 personnel in the US military, and maybe around 13,000 members in the State Department. So we're going to have to see how this uneven relationship works. And believe it or not, it's a dangerous profession. Since the Vietnam War, more ambassadors than generals have been killed in the line of duty. And one of the most recent was Ambassador Chris Stevens, who died in Benghazi. So what's it like to be in the Foreign Service? To travel to different countries, to pick up your family and move every couple of years, and to give yourself over to these principles here. Worldwide availability. You will go wherever you are sent in the world. Now, you have ways to influence where you're going to be sent. You can try and shape your career, but basically, if the State Department needs you to go to Afghanistan without your wife or your husband, you go. Worldwide availability. There is acceptance of hardship. There are many hardships in the Foreign Service. Economic, financial, health risks, not just for you, but for your family. And then wars and coups and problems like that. And finally, you have to be capable of nonpartisan loyalty. When you're in the Foreign Service, you never tell people how you vote. You serve all presidents equally loyally, Republicans or Democrats. You keep your politics to yourself. In fact, it's illegal to wear a campaign button to work or to advocate for your party. So you have to be very careful about that. We serve the US government. We serve the Constitution. I'll talk a little bit about our first diplomats. They were among some of our most famous founding fathers, and they did a very good job getting us started as a country. But then in the 19th century, the profession became sort of degraded because a lot of people bought their way in. They were friends of the president, or they made a donation, and they scooped up all the lucrative posts. And in those days, if you were like, the most lucrative post in the world was Liverpool, because any ship coming here had to get a paper signed off by a consul. And the fees they paid to get their papers certified went into the pocket of the consul. That's how it worked. So that was a really plum job to have, right? So in the 20th century, there were reforms to make it a more professional service, starting in 1924. And in 1980, we had a major law, Foreign Service Act, that put the Foreign Service on a par with the military in terms of ranks and compensation and predictability. And that was a good thing. Ooh, I'm sorry, could go back. Forgot how to go back. There we are. I'm going to tell you, let's get that on. Yeah, I get it. Got a touchy finger. I'm going to tell you about a lot of diplomatic jargon. You're going to learn about practices like protocol and immunity and persona non grata. You'll learn what a non-paper is. You learn what a démarche is. And a démarche is not what one political appointee said one time in a meeting. Oh, démarche, that's where we hunt the ducks, right? No. We'll see where our diplomats are trained. It's the Foreign Service Institute. It's a beautiful campus outside of DC in Arlington, Virginia. The first class all diplomats take is called A100. It's the basic officer class. It runs about 6 to 8 weeks, and it culminates in a flag ceremony where the new officers learn what their new posting is, what their first posting is going to be. I mean, they've expressed their preferences, but they don't know what they're going to get. So that's the day that they find out. Then as their career goes on, they return to FSI for many more training experiences, tradecraft, foreign languages, intensive language study, security studies, and I mean like personal security, safe driving, that kind of thing. And there's even a seminar for new ambassadors. So FSI is a very important part of the diplomat's life. I'll show you our operations center, which operates around the clock, 7 days a week, 52 weeks a year, 365 days a year, to be the nerve center and to connect the State Department with all of these embassies around the world. And when urgent news comes into the Ops Center, they can immediately alert all the principals in Washington, the president if need be, the Secretary of State, whoever needs to hear about it. Very demanding work and very important. We'll look at the effect of the Foreign Service on family lives. Families and spouses typically go overseas with the officer. Imagine the challenges and the opportunities of raising a family in several consecutive foreign environments. It's on the whole, it's probably good for the kids, but there are definitely challenges there. We'll talk about the logistics of picking up your entire household and moving every couple of years. In my career, I was in the service for 33 years and we made 12 major international moves, and none of them was easy. We'll confront the stereotype that we don't really need embassies anymore because we have email and we have phones, right? And we have Zoom. Nothing could be farther from the truth. There are times when you really cannot replace the value of the personal touch, of sitting in a room with someone, knowing someone, and talking through a problem. I'm going to focus a bit on women in the Foreign Service. Not only the question of achieving equality within the service, but being able to model American values overseas. When I came into the Foreign Service, the number of women in senior positions, heck, the number of women in the officer class was vanishingly small. But now it's almost at parity. And I think it's made a serious improvement in the organization. I think it's done us good internally and again, made us much more effective in carrying out our jobs overseas. American embassies have an important role in facilitating business, leveling the playing field for our companies. One example was the Open Skies Agreement that we negotiated with Brazil that brought American air carriers there. We have many other examples to look at, and they're all really interesting. I will talk about some of the people in an embassy who are not from the State Department. My favorite is the Marine Guards. They guard every embassy. There's a small detachment. The minimum size is, I think, 7 people. They stand watch 24/7. They're there to protect the premises and to protect the classified documents, not to protect us, but that's okay. They're usually a great group of people. Sometimes, though, having a group of young men and women aged between 18 and 22 in a place like Paris, it can pose complications. But on the whole, they are a very welcome part of the embassy community. Talk about the diplomatic couriers. They and their families live overseas, but their job is to travel constantly to take sensitive materials from one post to the other. So often, back at the embassy, we may know their wives and their kids pretty well, but we never see them because they're always on the road. We're going to meet many ambassadors in this class, and we're going to talk about the political versus career ambassador question. Both Democratic and Republican presidents love appointing political ambassadors. They give these jobs out to contributors and donors and friends. Any other foreign service, Britain, France, Italy, China, I mean, this is crazy. I've never heard of this, and it does pose some kind of unique problems for us. Do you know who this guy was? Does he look familiar? If you take a guess, do you think he's political or career? This is Gordon Sondland, who was Trump's ambassador to the EU. And he got involved in the Ukraine scandal. So good picture. The heart of the class, though, is going to be the stories, the personal stories. And they're going to come from my experience and the experience of my colleagues and predecessors. We're going to hear an officer talk about what it was like as a young officer to be dragooned into serving as Nixon's interpreter during that famous trip to China in '72. We're going to hear about the time an American ambassador had to walk out of his own 4th of July party with a US president in tow. And we will see why he had to do that. We'll look at the brave consular officers who are there to help Americans overseas, whatever happens to them, and how at least, well, many times they've had to work complicated cases at Christmas time, including a plane crash in Colombia and then the terrible tsunami in Southeast Asia. I have a video of one of the hostages from the Iran hostage crisis talking to us about how he dealt with the local leadership there when he was a hostage. And we're going to have to talk about the terrorist events, the bombings, the assassinations of ambassadors, because it's a very real factor in the life. I'll show you, even in a posting like U.S. Embassy to the Vatican, there can be important diplomatic breakthroughs and moments when you really have to work hard. In closing, this is my first diplomatic passport. It was issued in 1973. It was the beginning of a wonderful journey for me. 33 years, more of a lifestyle than a job, really. I have so many things to tell you about it. I really hope that you will come and take this class and enjoy it. I just can't wait to tell you all about it. Thank you.
Tales from the Foreign Service, Marie Hutala. That'll be on Wednesdays, beginning September the 21st from 3 to 5 here in the Burger Center. Now let's shift gears again and we'll go back to film. The films of John Huston. In this course, we'll experience the mastery of John Huston, adventurer, maverick, rascal, and born storyteller who has written and directed some of the most acclaimed movies. The Maltese Falcon, The Treasure of the Sierra Madre, The Asphalt Jungle, and The African Queen will be the focus of this course. This is a 4-week course beginning on Thursdays, beginning September the 22nd in the East Recreation Center. It will run from 2 o'clock in the afternoon until 5. Please note the early start time. We need to start an hour early in order to be able to show the film in its entirety and allow time for discussion. The instructor is well known to Oakmont residents, Terry Ebinger. She's a passionate film scholar with 3 decades of experience as a psychological practitioner and educator, dream consultant, and multidisciplinary group leader. Please welcome back Terry Ebinger.
I am just thrilled to be here. We're here in person. Oh, and I can't wait to show you these films. The way my classes are structured is we get an extra hour here. We start at 2, we go till 5, so that we get a lecture. And in that lecture, I'm going to orient you into how to watch the film more deeply, how to really notice things that we might have not noticed before, so that we're seeing what film is all about, which is a metaphor delivery system. It's a way to speak the language of dreams, the language of myth, the symbolic language, but I'm really committed to making that accessible and to making it fun. So we start with the lecture, we watch the whole movie together, and then we come back for some discussion. John Huston. John Huston is one of those brilliant filmmakers that isn't necessarily a household name. And who knows why, but somehow he kind of fell through the cracks in terms of being recognized by name. This is the Treasure of the Sierra Madre is when he won Best Director and Best Actor for supporting actor for his father, Walter Huston. So this is them collecting their Oscars after the Treasure of the Sierra Madre. Every film we're going to watch, the 4 we're going to watch, are masterpieces. They're perfect films. We don't often get to do that. There we go. we're going to start with the Maltese Falcon. Then I always like to go chronologically because there's always something going on socially and in the culture that is reflected in the filmmaking. So Maltese Falcon, Treasure of Sierra Madre, The Asphalt Jungle, and The African Queen. So we actually get to cross genres and see his work across genres. He's a writer director. Every single one of these films was nominated for Best Screenplay in the year it was made. The one that won everything was Treasure of Sierra Madre. All three of these films were nominated for Best Director, which is the Director's Award. And we know them. Many people have seen all of them. Some of those you won't have seen. Well, let me just say a little bit more about John Huston. He's a grand adventurer. He's an eccentric, a maverick, a rascal, and a born storyteller. There's so many stories about him because he was just so magnetic. And The Maltese Falcon is the very first film he ever makes. Before that, he was known as a screenwriter. In fact, he wrote High Sierra and some other films that we will talk about in class in terms of knowing their names. But that writer-director, on the Writers Guild list of 100 best screenplays of all time, he has 3 screenplays. The only person who has more than him is Billy Wilder with 4. So he was really known as the most literate of filmmakers. He always had a book in his hand, and all of his films were they were all adaptations of literature. So he was really a literate guy, and that's part of what makes his films so interesting. His films are all character studies of larger-than-life men and the complicated women who love them, flawed dreamers in pursuit of fortune, and their glorious quests at odds with fate. These are beautiful losers, men and women who are seeking a better life and following their hearts. And often fate gets in the way of whatever their determination is. He was known for casting. He felt that casting was one of the most important parts of making a film. Every single one of these films we're going to see is perfectly cast. Look at this cast here. In fact, we're going to have 3 movies by Humphrey Bogart. So we'll get to see his range as he actually made 6 movies or 7 with Huston. So they loved each other. So we got Humphrey Bogart in his big role that really set his career in motion. We've got Peter Lorre, Mary Astor, and Sidney Greenstreet in his very first film role. Just incredible, incredible. And so it's 1941. It's widely considered the very first film noir by film scholars. Think of that, the very first film noir. And that means we're going to talk about the phases of film noir and see how in this first phase, it's about dialogue. It's about interaction between characters. It's very character driven, not so much action driven. And it's Hammett's Sam Spade. So we're going to see how Humphrey Bogart sets the tone for the lone detective movie. Lone private eye versus eccentric con artist. That's really what the heart of that story is about. Treasure of the Sierra Madre. Oh, I put 40. Oh, wait a minute. 1948. So this is Huston's first film after the war. He participated in the war, making documentaries. He even made a documentary about the men having come back from war traumatized. And it was so powerful. It was so provocative that it got squashed by the government till 1980. So Treasure of Sierra Madre, we've got that post-war atmosphere that we see in films after the war by the great directors. Weary, disillusioned, wounded men, but still they're dreamers. These are the beautiful losers, the impossible dreamers, the twists of fate that come in because of their hubris and their greed in the search for gold. So it's also a mythic parable. I'm always going to be looking for the mythic dimensions, the folkloric dimensions of film, because every great film is a mythic story. So we're going to be looking at the mythic parable of the search for gold and the greed and the hubris that brings people down. And then humanity versus nature is at the heart of a lot of Huston's work. He's really interested in that because he himself went all kinds of adventures. He was really known as a grand adventurer. The Asphalt Jungle. It's going to take a moment to come up. The quintessential heist movie, the quintessential caper movie. It's like the Maltese Falcon set the template for film noir, for the first phase of film noir. The Asphalt Jungle set the template for heist movies to this day. You can see its influence in every heist movie that's made. 1950, it's the mythic final caper. You know, the guys are going to go on one last caper to try to find a better life for themselves. And it's an ensemble, like all of his ensembles are, of eccentric artists and their opposites, eccentric men, women, and their opposites. So you put those opposites together in an ensemble and you're going to have tension. And that tension is what makes up this story. And also Huston's films, the characters' psychological flaws are what defeat their quest. That's what brings them down. So we get really interested in that. What's the psychology of these people? And here we've got Louis Calhern in a brilliant role, Sterling Hayden, Jean Hagen. We just saw her in Singing in the Rain. She's the ditzy blonde from Singing in the Rain. She has a completely different role in this, and she's incredible in it. And the great Sam Jaffe. The African Queen, many of you have seen this. This will be in Technicolor, 1951. The legendary location adventure done in Africa on the river. The story of the making of the film is as famous as the film itself. A river journey as a road trip. I'm really interested in road trip movies. In road trip movies, you have an alchemical container. You have a vessel with the lid on and opposites put into it, and they change each other. And so we got the alchemical union of opposites. They start out as opposites, and by the end of the film, they've come into a union. It's a really positive, hopeful story that draws on what happened in the war, because the Germans are the enemy in this story. The Nazi Germans. Midlife love story of reunion with the lost self. I'm very, very interested in midlife tales and elder tales, and we'll get to really look at that in this film. Is what did each of these elders leave behind in their lives, and how does meeting the other help that come to the forefront? It's a very healing, hopeful story to end on. Okay, I wanted to show before we end here, let's go to this one. And we're going to stop this and start a different share and come to this one. I thought it'd be fun to just show a little taste of the Maltese Falcon from a scene I love. And I'm going to point out before we start, I want you to notice how Mary Astor and Humphrey Bogart are staged. In other words, how they move around in the room, how they're positioned in the room. I want you to watch how the camera follows them, follows her in particular, and how then the camera zooms in on her face to give us a real extreme close-up so we get to see what's happening. Every one of these films has lots of humor. That's one of the things that Huston brought with him to his way of telling stories. So let's start this. We're going to look at about a minute of it.
Ground.
Mr. Spade,
Let's get the volume up if we can.
Not yet. I've been stalling them until I could see you.
do they have to
Is there any, can we get the volume up there at all? We have the same problem here where I have my volume all the way up. And let's see.
know about me? I mean, can't you shield me so that I won't have to
Oh,
answer their
it's not
questions?
gonna work.
Maybe. But I gotta know what it's all
If I
about.
get the volume up. That happens
I can't
sometimes.
tell you. I can't tell you now. I will later
It's
when I
set
can.
up so it doesn't come through
You've
the
got to
computer.
trust me,
Sorry,
Mr. Spade.
that was a great idea though. Okay,
Oh,
it's all
I'm
right.
so alone.
So it's all up. It's up as high as it can go. Sometimes that happens. So we'll have workarounds when necessary. He's a master of adaptation. It's all about characters, eccentrics. Women are given space to develop. The Treasure of Sierra Madre is the only one where there isn't a significant woman, but we get to really see women actors get to develop their characters. They're ensemble pieces, they're mythic adventures, they're intrepid groups of men and women in search of a better life against the whims of fate. 3 Bogart performances, finally gets his Best Actor Performance Award for The African Queen, and we get to really observe his range. Okay, and Houston is always finding the humanity within his characters, no matter what their deeds are. He wants us to see them as for their humanness. So I hope you'll sign up. We're going to have fun. We're going to really learn a deeper way to view film and to learn about these particular stories and this director. And I hope to see you on September 22nd. We start at 2, we go to 5. I hope to see you then. Thanks for coming.
Thank you, Terry. The films of John Huston, Thursdays, 4 weeks, beginning September the 22nd at 2 o'clock at the East Recreation Center. Sounds like a great deep dive into some of my favorite films. And now for our next selection, King Tut's Tomb. When the burial place of Tutankhamun was discovered in 1922, the story of the tomb and its spectacular contents became a worldwide news sensation. 100 years later, revisit the life and times of the young king and the meaning and the purpose of the splendid objects found in his tomb. This is a 4-week class beginning on October the 24th. It's Mondays here in the Burger Center from 3 to 5, and the cost is $65. The instructor is Lynn Ostling, who's an adjunct instructor of art history at Santa Rosa Junior College, published author and freelance lecturer on art history circuits and on television. Please welcome Lynn Ostling.
Is it working? Good. Okay. Yeah, working. Well, thank you for that nice introduction. I should mention that I am no longer an adjunct instructor at Santa Rosa Junior College. I'm retired, but I'm coming out of retirement for this opportunity to revisit King Tut's tomb. The reason that I thought of doing this class is that it is the 100-year anniversary of the discovery of King Tut's tomb. So I thought we should celebrate it, just why not? I'm going in the wrong direction here. So my classes will start later than the other ones. I start on October 24th from 3 to 5 in this room. And I did put on there that I'm retired now. But I did teach classes for many, many years to big rooms full of basically 19-year-olds. And they loved King Tut. He was always their favorite. So why are we revisiting this tomb now for its 100th anniversary? Because there's still new things being discovered about the objects that were found in this tomb. We're actually going to be meeting over the period of time of the very end of October and the beginning of November, which is when the tomb was discovered 100 years ago. It was on November 4th that the very first of these rock cut steps were found by Howard Carter in the Valley of the Kings in Egypt. And he found this stairway going down into the living rock itself. The whole stairway was filled in with sand and dirt and rocks and garbage. So he had his workers start digging it out. And at the bottom of the stairway, he found a sealed door, which meant that nobody'd been in this tomb recently. It still had the seal of the caretakers of the royal necropolis. So he sent a telegram to his patron, or you might say his sponsor, Lord Carnarvon. And this is part of what the telegram said. Lord Carnarvon was in England. And what Carter did is he filled in the stairway. As he says here, he recovered it. He closed it all in again, posted guards, very essential, and sent this telegram to Lord Carnarvon, and then waited for 2 weeks. You can imagine how antsy he was to get into this tomb. And here we see Lord Carnarvon with his daughter, Lady Evelyn, and Howard Carter. These are the principal actors in the discovery of this tomb. So how do we approach this whole subject? I decided to divide these classes into 4 sections: context, Amarna, discovery, and splendor. And the first one, which is named context, is basically about life in ancient Egypt. What did people wear? What did they eat? What did they believe? We'll be talking about the Nile River and the name that the Egyptians gave their land, which was Kemet. This means the black land. It has nothing to do with the color of the skin of the inhabitants. It has to do with the black alluvial soil that the Nile deposited every year and that made the land so fertile. So there were 2 basic cycles that the Egyptians recognized: the cycle of the sun, which apparently was born every morning and died every evening. And then there was the annual cycle of the Nile flood. So we shouldn't be surprised to find that the Egyptians also believed that human life had a similar kind of cycle. And this is why there was so much emphasis on the afterlife, the next life. So this rich alluvial soil meant that the Egyptians had 2 crops every year. The favorite Egyptian blessing was, "May you always have plenty of beer, bread, beef, and geese." These were the favorite Egyptian foods. And we'll talk a little bit about what the Egyptians ate and how they grew their crops. We'll also talk about how they amused themselves, what kinds of games they played, music, dancing, jewelry, wigs. Have you ever wondered what those things are on the top of their heads? We'll find out. We noticed that the Egyptians seemed to enjoy life, and they wanted to carry that enjoyment into the next life. We're going to be talking about some of the gods and goddesses of Egypt. There were about 2,000 gods and goddesses, so we're not going to talk about all of them, just a small sample. Here we see Isis, Selket, and Ma'at. And you notice there's a little red T there. That means that this is one of the objects from Tutankhamun's tomb. You don't have to wait until the 3rd session to see objects from the tomb. We'll be looking at them throughout the time. And we have some gods of ancient Egypt: Osiris, Horus, and Anubis. We'll become familiar with all of these fellows. And we'll also encounter some symbolism, some of which I'm sure you're already familiar with, such as the Ankh, this sort of cross shape with a loop at the top, the scarab beetle, and the eye of Horus. And we'll talk about Egyptian writing. This is one of the key aspects of studying ancient Egypt. We actually can read Egyptian writing. So we'll talk about the decipherment of the hieroglyphic form of writing, the Rosetta Stone, which of course was a key element in that, and we'll even learn to read some hieroglyphics. So on the left, we have King Tut's hieroglyphic, Tutankhamun, spelled out in hieroglyphic symbols. On the right side, we have his throne name, the name that he received when he became the ruler of Egypt, Nebuchadnezzar, and we'll learn to read all of these symbols. And that brings us to our second session, where the focus is on Egyptian history, and particularly the period that's known as the Amarna period. This is right around the time when King Tut himself was born. But we're going to start much earlier than that, with the period of time all the way back in about 3100 BC, when Egyptian history really begins with the beginning of writing. So we'll look at a couple of examples from that early era, such as this carved slab of stone known as the Palette of King Narmer. And we'll, of course, talk about the Great Pyramids, probably the most recognizable of all monuments from ancient Egypt, and the only one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world that still exists. But all of these, of course, are a long time before King Tut. We're skipping ahead here to the New Kingdom. We'll mention briefly some other monuments from the Old Kingdom and from the Middle Kingdom. But the New Kingdom is the period of time when Tutankhamun lived and died. Here we see some columns from the great temple of Amun at Karnak, and we'll also be meeting a couple of pharaohs from this period of time. Hatshepsut lived before King Tut's time, and she was one of the very few female pharaohs. There were 4 in ancient Egyptian history, and she's one. We'll also meet Ramses II. He lived after King Tut's time, but he created some amazing monuments that I think you might like to see. And also he has the distinction of being the pharaoh who lived the longest. He reigned for 67 years. But we're really going to focus primarily on the time around King Tut's life. Here we see his grandparents, Amenhotep III and Queen Tia. Their son, Akhenaten, started life with his father's name, Amenhotep. So he was known as Amenhotep IV, but he changed his name. And we notice that he took away the portion of his name Amun, which was the name of one of the gods of ancient Egypt, and instead included the Aten, which was a name for the disk of the sun. And the reason that he made this change is that he changed the religion of Egypt from this more or less 2,000 gods and goddesses. See a few of them listed here. In other words, a polytheistic, very polytheistic form of religion, to monotheism, the worship of one God. And that God was the Aten, or the sun disk. Akhenaten also built himself a new capital city, which he named Akhetaten, the horizon of the Aten. The modern name for this location is Tel El Amarna, and it's this Amarna portion of that name that gives the name to this whole period, the period of Akhenaten, of this new religion, of the new capital city, is known as the Amarna period. And it's also the name of the new style of art that was introduced at this time. This is an example from King Tut's tomb that shows us the Amarna style of art, this more casual, relaxed, less rigid style of art. So we'll be talking about that as well. Now, Akhenaten and his beautiful wife, Nefertiti, had 6 daughters. We see 2 of them here on the right. But according to what we can learn about his period of time is that he had no sons by Nefertiti, only daughters. This little boy who became known as Tutankhamun, was probably the son of Akhenaten and one of his other wives. Tutankhamun actually started life as Tutankhaten because he grew up during the period when the Aten was the focus of religious worship. He married one of the daughters of Akhenaten and Nefertiti. He became ruler at about age 8 or 9, and he ruled for about 10 years. And then he died. We'll talk about how he died, how he may have died, and about the burial practices that mummified his body and placed him in this magnificent tomb. And that brings us to the discovery of the tomb. So our third meeting, we'll be talking about the exciting story of Howard Carter, who had been excavating in the Valley of the Kings for a number of years. He was sponsored by Lord Carnarvon. And Lord Carnarvon, even though he was very wealthy, was kind of getting tired of pouring money down this rat hole and not having anything to show for it. So he told Carter that he was done. He was not going to sponsor any more excavation. And Carter talked him into one last season. In Egypt, of course, it's very hot in the summer. So the season started in November and ended sometime around April. So Carter said, well, okay, one more season, 1922. And of course, that was when the tomb was found. After digging out the stairway, Carter found a sealed door. Beyond that was a corridor, also filled from bottom to top with sand and dirt and rocks and odd bits of this and that. So that all had to be dug out. And then we imagine Carter and Lord Carnarvon and Lady Evelyn at that second sealed door, the one that opens from the corridor into the antechamber. And Carter looked in with a candle and saw this, a jumble of odds and ends, strange beasts, containers of all kinds, and as he described it, everywhere the glint of gold. So we'll be talking about objects that were found in this first chamber, the antechamber. Chariots, for example, we see one on the left. This wonderful imitation folding camp stool made out of wood inlaid with ivory with beautiful gold duck's heads. This magnificent painted chest, which shows us on each side Tutankhamun himself as a young man in his chariot drawn by horses, mowing down his enemies. And we'll also look at some of these wonderful carved alabaster containers which held precious oils, perfumed oils. They were mostly empty because robbers had been in the tomb and had taken most of the small portable items that they could find, and also the precious perfumed oils. They had brought skin bags with them to pour the oil into. They didn't want to take the vessels, even though they're very beautiful, because they're all clearly marked with Tutankhamun's name. Would be incriminating evidence. And here we see Carter again with Lord Carnarvon. We can't see his face. They are just about to open the sealed door from the antechamber into the burial chamber. And here you can see it's about 3/4 opened up at this point. Beyond this point, we find the shrines and the coffins and eventually the mummy of King Tut himself. And that's in the burial chamber. So this brings us up to our last meeting, the splendor of the objects found in the tomb. And also the effect that this discovery had on all kinds of things, fashion, jewelry, books, movies. So we're looking here at the entrance to the treasury, which is the small chamber off of the burial chamber. And here we find Tutankhamun's mummified internal organs. Each one of them was placed in a little miniature coffin like we see here. And these were all placed inside of the wooden chest that we see on the right. We also find wonderful items of jewelry. The small bracelet on the right shows us a carved scarab beetle carved out of lapis lazuli. This bracelet is so small that it could only have been worn by a child. The bracelet on the left is one that was actually found on the mummy itself. And we'll explore with Howard Carter the opening of these nested shrines, the opening of the coffins, including the incredible 243-pound solid gold coffin, inside of which was the famous gold mask and the mummy of the young king. And then we'll talk about Tut Mania, which was the world press going mental over this idea of a tomb being found. This is why King Tut's tomb is so important. It's the only more or less intact tomb ever found from all these ancient Egyptian rulers. There may be more out there, but it's the only one we've found so far. So we have Tut Mania in the 1920s, a cigarette card, a box of lemons, and more beautiful, I think, this Cartier pin from the 1920s. And then we had Tut Mania again in the 1970s. I'm sure some of you remember going to see the exhibition that created such a stir back in those days. This is actually a photograph of my own copy of the catalog of that exhibition, and then a photograph of a whole lot of people standing in line. This exhibition was actually seen by literally tens of millions of people. It traveled all over the world. And then finally, we have some quite recent developments. Did Carter steal anything from the tomb? Some of you may have seen a few headlines about this. Well, we'll explore this subject. And what can King Tut's mummy teach us? There's still things being discovered about his life and his death. This is a photograph of Zahi Hawass, who's the most famous Egyptologist of our day. So we'll discuss a little bit about what he's found. Now, I wanted to mention, if you're interested in things Egyptian, there is a new exhibition called Ramses the Great and the Gold of the Pharaohs. It just opened in San Francisco and it runs through February. And in fact, I saw this flyer in the back. There's, I guess, a group going. I just saw this exhibition last Friday, and I have to say there weren't as many fabulous objects in it as there were in the old King Tut exhibit, but there were a lot of beautiful things and strikingly interesting things, and a lot of videos, kind of multimedia presentations. So I recommend it. And that's all I have to say. I hope you'll join me for 4 sessions about King Tut and his tomb. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn.
How do I take this?
King Tut's tomb that begins on October the 24th on Mondays here in the Burger Center. And the tour that Lynn referred to is being sponsored by Day Tripping Tour Company. We're not affiliated with them, but just as a courtesy, there are flyers in the back if you are interested in participating. Well, as they say in Chicago, register for classes early and often. We've got wonderful selections for you this term, and we hope that it piques an interest. We invite you to enjoy some more refreshments, please. Our instructors are here available to talk with you. So if you have any questions, you have any comments, anything you want to explore a little bit further, I know that they'd love to talk with you. We want to thank you very, very much for joining us. I also want to urge you to go to our website, oakmontll.org, and sign up for our mailing list. It's very easy. Just open up the page, scroll down to the bottom, gives you an opportunity to give an email address. That way it'll give you the opportunity to get up-to-date announcements about courses, about concerts, or any other information we need to share with you. So again, thank you all so much for being here today. Please stick around and chat, and thank you.